From WisPolitics in Madison, you're listening to Capital Chats.
Hello, everybody. This is Kate Morton with WisPolitics here with a Capital Chats podcast brought to you by Spectrum. Today I'm in the Madison office to talk with my colleague Abigail Levins about an interview she did with the president of the Wisconsin Association of Independent Colleges and Universities, Eric Fulcomer. So, Abigail, what did you two talk about during the interview?
Thanks, Kate. Eric and I talked about federal funding cuts and how they're affecting private colleges, as well as how the state budget can help with grant funding for these colleges.
All right, well, let's hear what he had to say.
Well, Eric, it's nice to meet you. Thank you for joining. I want to talk to you about what you do at the Wisconsin Association of Independent Colleges and Universities. So I saw that you started there at the end of 2022. So do you mind if we just start by talking about your background and what prepared you for this role?
Sure. Well, I'm happy to be here. Thank you very much for the opportunity to be with you today and to talk about the Wisconsin grant and state funding and perhaps a little bit of federal funding as well for higher education. So my background, I've spent my entire career in higher education. So I've been in college since I was 18 years old and never left. So for about 30 years, I worked at two private universities, one in Ohio, one in Illinois. I started out as a residence hall director, but spent most of my time as a vice president, both in student life and enrollment management. I was president of Rockford University for 6.5 years before assuming this role in December of 2022. So my career has been in private higher education. It's been incredibly rewarding work as we've been able to watch thousands and thousands of students graduate and go out into the world. So yeah, it's a great profession and prepared me well then to move into this role where WICU supports all of the private colleges and universities in the entire state of Wisconsin. So I'll get to work with 22 college and university presidents. We represent just over 52,000 students. And so it's great. It's a great joy and privilege for me to be able to travel the state, visit our schools, and to advocate for them on their behalf, both at the state capitol and also in Washington.
Sure. And you're right that I wanted to talk about federal funding as well as state funding. And why don't we start by talking about federal funding, since that's something that a lot of people are thinking about. And we're looking at a lot of federal funding cuts, some specific targeting to the Department of Education. Wondering what kind of threats you're seeing to private colleges and universities right now.
Yeah, well, the entire financial aid program is threatened through these budget cutting processes. So for next year, for the next academic year, the dollar amounts for Pell, the Supplemental Education Opportunity Grant, College Work Study, those programs have been continued for one more year. So they're flat funded into the next academic year. But through this budget reconciliation process, there are significant threats to federal financial aid. We don't know what might happen to the Pell program. There are some specific proposals, both from the White House as well as the Republican Congress, that are talking about changing Pell, that would make it more difficult for students to get a full Pell grant. So that's one thing. The Supplemental Education Opportunity Grant, which supports the neediest students in higher education, that program is suggested to be eliminated by the White House and also Congress. The College Work Study program suggested to be eliminated, both by the White House and Congress. And then there's significant changes to the federal loan programs that are being proposed. And so there's basically three major changes that are being suggested. The first is that the subsidy, so students with the highest need have their interest waived during their enrollment period. So they don't accrue interest and they don't have to pay interest during their enrollment period. That is a longstanding part of the program. They're talking about eliminating that. So that would affect all undergraduate students currently receiving subsidized loans. Then in the graduate side, there are two loan programs. There's one called the Graduate Plus Loan and one called the Unsubsidized Graduate Loan. Both the Senate and the House proposals are talking about eliminating the Grad Plus loan and putting significant loan limits on the unsubsidized loan, which could threaten the opportunity for needy students to be able to pursue professional degrees such as law degrees, medical degrees, dental degrees, but also would perhaps prevent students from going into much needed professions like counseling and teaching and those kinds of things that require advanced degrees. So we're concerned about all those proposals. Like I said, for this coming year, the financial aid program appears to be at least stable, but after that, we don't know what's going to happen. And so this next several months in Congress is really an important time, because between now and July 4th, when the president wants to have his bill passed that he's been proposing. So there's a lot of discussion, a lot of work that will happen between now and then. But the whole goal is to find pay for his tax cuts, to make those 2017 tax cuts permanent. In order to do that, they need to cut funding, cut spending in other areas. And one of those areas they're looking at is financial aid.
Yeah, and it sounds like a lot of these impacts, especially for private colleges, is the financial aid to students and these grants. Do you have any information on how many students are using these grants that are within your
Sure.
colleges, and are they using it to pay for a large portion? So is
Yeah.
losing the grant going to be really detrimental to them?
Yeah. So as far as financial aid, when you look at our students at our Wisconsin private colleges, about 3% of the aid that they receive comes from the state. About 6% of it comes from federal government. I'm talking about grants, not loans. I'll get into loans in a moment, but about 3% from the state, 6% from the federal government, and 91% of the financial aid they receive is from the institution. So our institutions are providing the bulk of financial aid. But as far as the loan program, about 50% of our students borrow some money 50% of our undergraduate students, borrow money to be able to pay for their education. And so on average, they might be borrowing about $6,000 to $7,000 a year. So it's not a huge amount of money, but it's the matter of whether they can attend or not attend college. So it's a significant amount of students. And then for graduate students, almost all graduate students, probably 80 to 90% of our graduate students borrow money through one of those programs. And so those are significant as well.
Sure. And you mentioned that there's a percentage that comes from the state. So that actually makes me a good segue into talking about state funding. And I was there when you talked to colleges and universities about your budget ask, which is to double the Wisconsin grant appropriation from 57 million to 114 million. And you mentioned that you haven't seen an increase in several budgets. So tell me more about why this budget ask, why you believe this is important.
Sure. And so the numbers you just mentioned are for the private nonprofit sector. Each sector has its own Wisconsin grant budget. So yes, our allocation for the Wisconsin grant, and that is a grant to the neediest students in our institutions. And so we have about 40,000 roughly undergraduate students in our schools, and about 8,000 of them get the Wisconsin grant. So we're talking about 20% of our students, but they're the ones who need it the most. The average grant is $4,400. And that is the lowest average grant. That's the maximum grant. $4,400 is the maximum grant that our students can receive. That is the lowest maximum grant in the Great Lakes. So all states surrounding us are investing more in their students. And so that's one of the points we were making at the hearing, is that we've lost ground, because we were not at the bottom 3 budget cycles ago, but we're at the bottom today. And so we have not received an increase in our allocation for the Wisconsin grant during the last 2 biennial budgets. And then the budget prior to that, there was a slight increase, and it was flat for a few budgets before that. So it's been a long time since we've seen a significant increase to the Wisconsin grant. So we're asking that the Wisconsin grant be doubled. That would allow us to be able to increase our maximum grant to about the average for the Great Lakes. It wouldn't get us to the top. There's, the top maximum grant in the Great Lakes is Indiana, and it's $12,400. So $4,400 and $12,000, that's a significant jump. We're not asking for that, but we'd like to get somewhere in the middle. And what that would allow us to do is to keep more of our students here who have need, because we want them to work at to go to school here and then to stay here and work. And so we'd like to keep our students here. And so that's what we're trying to achieve. So we want to retain state talent and grow the local workforce. We are a net importer of talent at the Wisconsin private colleges. About half of our students come from out of state, but 2/3 of our graduates work in Wisconsin after graduation. So we know that if we can get students to go to school here, either they're from here or come to Wisconsin, we know that they'll be likely to stay. We want to keep Wisconsin competitive in the Midwest. Right now, I mentioned we're at the bottom. We want to strengthen that critical public-private partnership. So UW and the tech colleges have a different relationship with the state than we do. You know, they receive significant operating dollars from the state. We don't receive operating dollars from the state. Our schools are receiving almost all of their funding comes from tuition and ancillary expenses or tuition and ancillary charges, and also from philanthropy. And so the entire allocation of all money that goes to students attending our institutions represents 1.47% of the total state investment in higher education. So, we're less than 2% of all spending in higher education, yet we produce 25% of all bachelor's degrees and 1/3 of all master's degrees. So we're definitely a great contributor to the Wisconsin economy. We think we're a great deal, and so we'd love to increase that public-private partnership, the partnership between our institutions and the state. And we also need more students to go to college. I mean, right now, only 51% of high school graduates in Wisconsin are going immediately to college. That's either a tech college or one of the four-year institutions. We need to increase that number because we have about 12,000 jobs a year that are open for students or for graduates who have at least a bachelor's degree that are going unfilled because we just don't have enough people in the state. So that's what we're asking for. We think it's a reasonable request. And we know that it'll make a significant contribution to Wisconsin's workforce in the future.
Sure, and I know we talked about concerns about losing federal funding. Do you think that increasing the state's percentage and the state contribution could help alleviate some of that?
It could certainly help alleviate that. I mean, yes, for sure. We don't know what's going to happen long term with the Pell Grant, which has been a foundation of financial aid for 50+ years. It was created in 1973, and so we want to see that program continue. But yes, any cut on the federal side is going to make it harder for the students with the most need to be able to attend college. And all these programs we're talking about, Pell Grant, Wisconsin Grant, the Supplemental Education Opportunity Grant, College Work Study, all of those programs are for the neediest students. So we're just trying to level the playing field so that everybody can have the opportunity to go to college if they desire to do so.
Great. Well, Eric, that's all the questions I have for you today.
Okay.
I appreciate you chatting budget with me, chatting through the federal and state budget, and thank you for your time.
Well, it's great to meet you and appreciate the opportunity to come in and visit with you.
All right, Abigail, thank you for sharing that interview with us. If our listeners want to learn more about the budget process, they can head to our website at wispolitics.com. In the meantime, I'm Kate Morton.
And I'm Abigail Evans.
Thanks for listening to WisPolitics Capital Chats, brought to you by Spectrum.